Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to another Quran study. God willing, today we'll be reading from Surah 6, verse 60. Let's all seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. Auzubillahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Death and resurrection every day. He's the one who puts you to death during the night and knows even the smallest of your actions during the day. He resurrects you every morning until your lifespan is fulfilled. Then to him is your ultimate return. He will then inform you of everything you had done. He's supreme over his creatures, and he appoints guards to protect you. When the appointed time of death comes to any of you, our messengers put him to death without delay. Then everyone is returned to God, their rightful Lord and Master. Absolutely, he's the ultimate judge. He's the most accurate reckoner. Say, who can save you from the darkness of the land or the sea? You implore him loudly and secretly. If he saves us this time, we will be eternally appreciative. Say, God does save you this time and other times as well. Then you still set up idols beside him. Say, he's certainly able to pour upon you retribution from above you and from beneath your feet. Or he can divide you into factions and have you taste each other's tyranny. Note how we explain the revelations that they may understand. So, as the subtitle says in the starting verses, God is reminding us that, He puts us to death and resurrects us every single day, and this is something that should be a reminder for us. Just like we go to sleep every day and then we wake up the next morning, the day before just feels like a dream, and and the same way, God is going to resurrect us on the day of resurrection, just like he resurrected us now. When you go to sleep and when you get resurrected, or what you get woken up, that whole process, how that happens, right? We have no control over it. We don't know how it really works. We don't know how the brain works, but God is the one who's able to make it work for us. Many people have issues. For example, they want to sleep but they can't. If we knew how to do it, we could just put ourselves to sleep, just press a button and fall asleep, but we can't do that. God is the one who does it, and he wakes us up every day, and God tells us that, he appoints guards to protect us. God has these giant angels that are very powerful, that are protecting us, and they protect us in accordance with God's will. Of course, if it's God's will, if it's in accordance with it, based on our level of protection, based on whether we're in God's kingdom or not, the other things could happen to us, but if we are on the right path, God's, guardians are there to protect us. These angels are appointed by God to look after us and keep us away and protected and safe from like all types of evil things and all types of mishaps and things like that. And like, for example, the Psalms 91 talks about how, for example, even if you're going to dash your foot against the stone, the angel is going to come before that happens and remove the stone. So it's beyond our perception, how that happens and how precise God's system is, and how detailed it is. God doesn't make a mistake in this matter. Everyone's fully guarded in accordance with their actions and what they deserve. And then we're being reminded that, when our appointed time comes, our messengers put them to death without delay. Now these messengers have a job, to take our souls. And then God is reminding us that we have to go back to God. Ultimately, he's going to judge us. And, this is something that we have to remember, that's only God, and God is telling us he is the ultimate judge. He is the accurate reckoner. There's no entity besides God who can benefit you or harm you in any way, and that holds true for eternity, now and forever. If you think that anyone besides God can help you in this world or in the hereafter, I mean, that's the definition of idol worship. And we know we have millions and millions of people, actually billions of people now, just now even, that are going to hell because they think that someone else besides God is going to help them on the day of judgment, get them out of hell, or change their destiny from hell to heaven, or just take them to heaven, regardless of what they do in this world, which leads to all sorts of corruption and tyranny and everything else, and evil in this world. But also, they don't realize that all their works are uh, in vain, because um, if you commit idol worship, it's an unforgivable offense, and everything that you do will be nullified. So God tells us in verse 65 as well, that He's certainly able to pour upon you retribution from above you and from beneath your feet, and He can divide you into factions and have you taste each other's tyranny. So God controls our everyday circumstances, right? He's able to send an asteroid whenever He wants. He's able to send an earthquake. He's able to send any kind of disaster, a tornado, anything, a volcano, or something else. An airplane can fall from the sky, for example. A satellite um, can do something. There's so many things that can happen, right? Can go wrong. I mean, God says, if it's your time for death, a death will catch up with you, even if you live in formidable castles, right? That are protected by every angle, and from every angle, and with guards and everything, right? And God says, and security, and God says that they will come for you, and we see that nothing can stop God from sending those messengers. Death doesn't um, cannot be obstructed in any way. Or you cannot cheat your death, right? It's whatever time it is. That's We understand that this is something that's going to happen. So nevertheless, we need to realize that it's a time that ultimately each and every one of us has to face, right? I mean, if you just really think about it, I mean, do we really think about, as we go on in our daily lives, that it will eventually happen? It's a reality, but people don't think about it, and people don't think they're going to die. But God is reminding us that ultimately you're going to die, because so obviously Satan doesn't want us to think about that, right? He wants us to continue on thinking like this world is all it is, and this world is forever. And yes, the hereafter is at the back of your mind, but Satan doesn't want you to think about that, right? He wants you to worry about the things of this world. But God is reminding us to put our hereafter before anything else. Remember that the time and the energy we spend thinking about the things of this world are just very, very temporary. And we should really think about our hereafter, because obviously that is the eternal life. And and God is reminding us that He fully controls everything. If He wants, we can all turn into different factions, as we are, in different factions in this world. I mean, we're different nations and countries and tribes and cities and states and all kinds of things, right? And but He can turn us all into enemies of one another. I mean, we see glimpses of that every now and then, and how chaotic and terrible it is. And it's a blessing from God that He allows us to enjoy peace in this world. For example, um, we can see, like, war-ridden countries and cities, and how people can just suffer from pain and brutality and injuries and trauma and starvation and all kinds of atrocities that may occur, but it's a blessing from God that we're able to enjoy a peaceful, free, somewhat free life in this world. And so this is God's blessing. And so God is explaining to us that these are all His blessings. Of course, He controls, our individual circumstances, or in our circumstances as communities. Verse 66 says, "You have rejected this, even though this is the truth. Say, I'm not a guardian over you. Um, every prophecy herein will come to pass, and you will surely find out." Respect for the word of God. "If you see those who mock our revelations, you shall avoid them until they delve into another subject. If the devil causes you to forget, then as soon as you remember, do not sit with such evil people. The righteous are not responsible for the utterances of those people, but it may help to remind them, perhaps they may be saved. You shall disregard those who take their religion in vain as if it is a social function, and are totally absorbed in this worldly life. Remind with this Quran, lest a soul may suffer the consequences of its evil earnings. It has none beside God as a Lord and Master, nor an intercessor. If it could offer any kind of ransom, it would not be accepted. They suffer the consequences of the evil works they earn. They have incurred hellish drinks and a painful retribution because of their disbelief." So God tells us that, people have rejected this Quran even though it is the truth. And you let them know that, fine, if this is your decision, go ahead. It's not my job to be your advocate and to drag you out of hell and to, bring you uh, into being saved like by force. You're the one. I'm just a person with the message. I'm inviting you to God, and whatever God is saying, obviously, we understand that God says every prophecy herein will come to pass, and you will surely find out. So every prophecy in this Quran that God has talked about, God is reminding us that it will come to pass. We understand, for example, the next prophecy, big prophecy that God has talked about, in this world, is, the smoke, and, God talks about Gog and Magog, and more importantly, God talks about the end of the world, and we understand that the events of the hereafter, all of these prophecies and everything that God talks about that is going to happen in the future, is going to happen, and God says you will surely find out, right? So every prophecy has its time, and eventually we will see all of these things, right before our eyes. But obviously, there are very fortunate people that have, the the ability, or the privilege to use that time, the guidance that God has given us, for to their benefit for that time. Our faith, that we believe in these things, so important at this time, before we see the angels, before we see these things happen. The credit goes to obviously those people. God says when they see it, it will be too late, right? When they see the end of the world, or when they see death, it will be too late, right? So the people who will benefit from this is people who are preparing for it ahead of time, and who believe in it ahead of time, and who lead a righteous life. I mean, that's how the whole test is designed, right? You don't see accountability right in front of you. Uh, if we had that, of course, many people would be forced to be righteous, because none of them would want to get any sort of punishment, right? But it's kind of obscured and delayed in a way that encourages bad people to do bad things, and good people to do good things. And then after that, God talks about the respect for the word of God. Now, there are many lessons I feel in these verses, like respecting for the word of God, right? For example, it's talking about people who mock God's revelations. right? Now you see, the extreme Mohammedans and the so-called Muslims who idolize Muhammad, like uh, get enraged and do absurd things and kill people and or want to kill people and do all kinds of things. Like for example, um, if you say something that they consider derogatory about Prophet Muhammad, they will want to kill those people. They will want to just drag them out on the streets and brutally kill them or do other things, or they will like start protesting and cause all kinds of scenes, or do some other obnoxious things like for example, like you give death threats and even on occasions like kill people who mock, for example, the prophet, right? But here God is talking about, and yet these people will do nothing when you mock God, right? But God is giving us, the laws and the rules and what to do. I mean, how you can behave in those circumstances, right? Like let's say you're in a mixed gathering with people of different religions, let's say in your workplace or in some sort of a gathering, like at an event or something, and people make a joke about God's revelations, like say they make a joke about the Quran or something, right? You can start uh, I mean, getting angry, and you can tell them, hey, don't talk about this, like this offends me, and you should not be talking about this. I mean, that's one way of addressing it, right? But the preferred way, the Quranic way of addressing this sort of a situation is to simply uh, walk away, to simply walk out of that uh, gathering. Obviously, it's not even telling us to like stand up and do a walkout. Like for example, people you see, for example, people who are protesting, walk out of a ceremony, making a big scene. Hey, we're walking out, and everybody walks out in a group. No, God says just avoid them, just leave. You don't need to cause a scene. Like you don't need to say, hey, this is against my religion, and you can't offend me. I'm offended or anything like that. I mean, God just says walk out. I mean, it's gently. It's a good way to remind them in a way that you're not being forceful, but in a way that it makes the other person think about it. It doesn't push the other person either, or a kind of authoritative way of, hey, you better respect my religion. It's not that way, right? I mean, when you walk out of a situation like that, it just shows that you don't want to impose, but obviously you feel reverent about God, and you've made your stand without, making a compulsion on other people to, uh, you know, um, conform to your religious ideas, right? Obviously they have the freedom to do whatever they want, but it helps to remind them, in a very subtle but balanced way, that what they're doing is not good. Obviously, because those people might not be related to you, they might not be your parents or your siblings or whatnot, and you cannot always talk. Sometimes you could, but the best thing is just avoid such people. Like if you see these things on TV or media, just avoid it, rather than entertain it and engage with it, or, say, I want to have a debate, you know. So this is God's way, and mashallah, I really like that, like when we see people going in different directions, trying to cause a scene. It just looks like they're trying to get attention. I mean, to me, personally, that's what it feels like. I mean, if you're just righteous, just walk away. That's the best thing you can do. God says in the next verse too, verse 70, just disregard people who take their religion in vain, people who are absorbed at this worldly life, because you know why? Because we're already and we're swimming against the current, right? Everybody's going towards that direction, and so if you try to mingle with such people, if you try to like, follow that same flow, I mean, if you hang out with such people, obviously you will get sucked in to the things that they talk about, like the perspectives that they have, like say someone's complaining all the time, or someone's talking about all sorts of evil things or worldly things. I mean, it's very easy to lose your focus, and it's also, people talk about it in a life from every angle in a way. They're blind, these people are blind. And so when you hear them talk about the world, they, it's like a blind person talking, right? And they look and go through life as if they're dead and blind people. I mean, that's how the Quran describes them, and that's how it really feels like when you hang around these people, because they don't see anything what is really going on around them. I mean, it's just like, a blind person just feeling things here and there, and they can't really see the whole picture. uh, and Eventually God is telling us to avoid these people, because if you hang out with these people, eventually you're going to become uh, like them, right? They will push you along with them in that direction. Obviously, there will be times when you want to please them, and you want to, acquiesce to their ideas or requests or wishes in certain scenarios. And so, they will kind of rub off on you. And so God is telling us to, set our priorities straight. God tells us to force ourselves to be with the believers. Obviously, these are the people that you could still remind, right? But God is telling us to disregard these people. Like, you don't want to, make these people your best friends, that you spend, your every, hour of leisure with. And God tells us that these people who are absorbed in this worldly life, obviously their priorities are messed up. And if you do that, which we know people do that, right? Like, just make it your business to hang out with people who are absorbed in the worldly life, who don't care about submission, who don't care about the religion. And you have your uncles, and you have your friends, and you have your coworkers and your family members, and you all day long you're just entertaining them, hanging out with them. God is telling us not to do that. Obviously, we want to spend some time giving them the message and stuff, right? But that's about it. Like, we have no business in excessively, socializing with these types of people, because their their focus is not God, and God says, really, and it's important for us, because God says, um, that we should remind people. Obviously, also same verse, God says, I mean, we can remind these people. um, but I mean, obviously, if you see that your reminders are falling on deaf ears, then obviously there's no point in continuing to hang out with such people. And God says, obviously, everyone will suffer the consequences of their works on the day of judgment, and people who don't take heed will incur hellish drinks and a painful retribution for because of their disbelief. I mean, imagine, like, trying to drink water that's smelly or bitter or something like that. And when God talks about the hellish drinks, it talks about, I mean, of course, it's an allegorical description, but, it's pretty disturbing, like, to think about it, right? Even the allegories. And we know it's going to be worse than that, so it's I would say it's pretty scary, and it's pretty sad at the same time for the people that will still choose to be in that position. Verse 71 says, "Say, shall we implore beside God what possesses no power to benefit us or hurt us, and turn back on our heels after God has guided us? In that case, we would join those possessed by the devils and rendered utterly confused, while their friends try to save them. Stay with us on the right path. Say, God's guidance is the right guidance. We are commanded to submit to the Lord of the universe." And also wanted to remember, I didn't read the footnote for 660. It says, "The righteous do not really die, they go straight to the same paradise where Adam and Eve once lived. The unrighteous die and experience a nightmare that lasts until the day of resurrection. And see these verses in Appendix 17. So again, we're being reminded to not implore anyone besides God, and to say to these people who invite you, like for example, we all get invitations from Satan through people, who are doing these things. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're a submitter, Satan will still send his agents to try to convert you. I mean, as I've shared this before, on that Discord server, like I was invited by this person who used to be a submitter and became a Jewish rabbi, and he was inviting me to join him. And then we time and time, like, we see messages from people trying to invite you to become a pagan Christian idol worshiper also. And we understand that, I mean, that they're inviting to hell, and they're inviting us to implore idols besides God, that cannot benefit us or hurt us in any way. They try to turn us back on our heels, and God says in that if we did that, obviously we would join those who are possessed by the devils and rendered utterly confused. And you see people, people have reverted from submission, for example, and become traditional Muslims or Jews, as in this case, or atheists. One person I knew who was a submitter, and then he turned into an atheist before he committed suicide. But he died before the age of 40. But still, like, it was God's mercy that he died before the age of 40, because if he didn't, he would have gone definitely to hell as well, right? So obviously, Satan is not gonna stop at the fact that you're a submitter to stop inviting you. Of course, people, they know better. Like, not everybody's gonna fall for this, and many people will understand that these are Satan's tricks. But not everybody is fortunate enough to be saved from such things. People, even very smart people, can fall for, like this person that I was telling you about that became an atheist. Like from the worldly standpoint, like he was really smart. Even that person that was Jew, that became a Jew, he had memorized the Quran, he knew all the verses, he had gone through all the math, miracle, and so was this other person who became an atheist. And that is pretty scary, because like at one point, like, you look at these people and you think like, wow, they're progressing so well in submission. You even think that they're doing better than you, and then you find out that these people are no longer, and you consider them better than you, and then you find out that these people are no longer submitters. So that's why it's important to implore God always for guidance. So God will now continue reading verse 72. It says, and to observe the contact prayer salat and to reverence him. He is the one before whom you will be summoned for the reckoning. He is the one who created the heavens and the earth truthfully. When he says, be, it is. His word is the absolute truth. All sovereignty belongs to him. The day the horn is blown, knower of all secrets and declarations, he is the most wise, the cognizant. So God tells us that, we should say that God's guidance is the right guidance, and this is how we should respond to these people, and that we're commanded to submit to God, who is the Lord of the universe, and to observe the contact prayer salat, and to reverence him. I mean, to reverence him alone. He is the only one before whom we will be summoned for our reckoning. It's not going to be any other entities besides God. And God can create anything. We understand that, God gives us the example, I mean, of how he says, whenever he says be, and it is. And that's how, that's all God needs to do to, have something done. Abraham debates with idol worshippers, verse 74. Recall that Abraham said to his father Azar, "How could you worship statues as gods? I see that you and your people have gone far astray." He showed Abraham the marvels of the heavens and the earth, and blessed him with certainty. When the night fell, he saw a shining planet. "Maybe this is my Lord," he said. When it disappeared, he said, "I do not like gods that disappear." When he saw the moon rising, he said, "Maybe this is my Lord." When it disappeared, he said, "Unless my Lord guides me, I will be with the strayers." When he saw the sun rising, he said, "This must be my Lord, this is the biggest." But when it set, he said, "O my people, I denounce your idolatry. I have devoted myself absolutely to the one who initiated the heavens and the earth. I will never be an idol worshiper." So this is Abraham's debate with the idol worshippers, and we know that Abraham was very wise and very courageous at the same time, and he never was an idol worshiper. And this uh, discussion or this monologue that we see here, initial part, I mean, this is not Abraham talking through his discovery of finding God, right? This is just basically his way of debating with the idol worshippers. And so, God had inspired him to, with wisdom, to debate with these people in a way that is thought provoking for the people who are listening, so they understand that, okay, let's start with, uh, you know, um, uh, let's start with the moon, then okay, let's go with the sun, and that's how. Well, let me start with all of these things, and eventually we realize that none of these things can persist indefinitely, and so the best solution is the right answer is to devote ourselves to God alone, who never dies and is always alive, um, and he denounced the idol worship. So that also shows to us that we're not, God doesn't prohibit us from using humor as a way to communicate an important concept. As in this case, we see that he used this mocking um, debate uh, to basically prove his point, right? And it is really a good way to prove your point, to send your point across. I mean, we see things like satire, as a very powerful tool to, communicate a message to your audience in a way that is interesting and thought provoking. So, God willing, I will continue reading. It says, his people argued with him. He said, "Do you argue with me about God after he has guided me? I have no fear of the idols you set up. Nothing can happen to me unless my Lord wills it. My Lord's knowledge encompasses all things. Would you not take heed? Why should I fear your idols? It is you who should be afraid, since you worship instead of God idols that are utterly powerless to help you. Which side is more deserving of security if you know?" So that is something very interesting that we see that is in common when you try to invite people to worship God alone. The idol worshippers will try to scare you with their idols, try to scare you into thinking that you're doomed and you're going to hell, etc. And we know this is a tactic by which they try to scare you. Fear is a tool of the devil, and they try to instill that fear of your idols, that okay, you better worship these idols or you're going to go to hell. You better take Jesus, for example, as a god, or you better take Muhammad as your savior, or you better take these saints, etc., or you could be doomed, right? um, or you better listen to, like, our scholars, etc., or you would be doomed. And we understand that these are all Satan's tactics, and the response should be that, it is you who should be afraid because you're worshiping idols. You should be the one, you should worry about your neck because you're the one who's worshiping idols, worry about your own neck. And this is what you tell these people. And God is telling us which side is more deserving of security, if you know, right? Obviously, worshiping God alone is more deserving of security, you know, so much so that, it is referred to here as the perfect security in the Quran. God calls it the perfect security for the believers. If we hire security for us, I mean, you can pay lots and lots of money to pay for security, but that security is not gonna work if it's God's will, for example, to hurt you in some way. Like for example, um, someone who is very wealthy or rich, and let's say they belong to like a royal family or something, and they have all kinds of guards and fancy security and everything else. It's not a perfect security. I mean, it can give them some type of security from certain things, but ultimately, they are dependent on God. Anything can happen. Many things can happen, and things do happen. All sorts of things happen, of course. But for the believers, you know, they are better than the kings and queens that we see in this world, and the presidents and all the royals and the celebrities. I mean, if you truly believe in God and you truly worship God and you make Him your God, God gives you the perfect security. In God's kingdom, there's no such thing as a headache. You don't even get a scratch, right? You could be, so rich, let's say, but your security that you pay for, there's no such security in this world that can prevent you from having a scratch. Nobody can take that responsibility. Say, with us, you'll not even never even get a scratch. You could be, getting dressed, and you could get a scratch from, your shoes or something. I mean, I'm just a terrible example, but we get the picture, right? I mean, in God's kingdom, you don't even get something so small as a scratch, unless you have done something to deserve it. And truly, people who believe in God, God tells us as students of the Quran, that people who believe and do not pollute their belief with idol worship, they have deserved the perfect security. Subhanallah. So this is something that is really reassuring. Especially when a devil tries to put fear in you, and certain situations may happen when you feel afraid in some way. So always remember that, if you worship God alone and you don't pollute your belief with any kind of idol worship, God says the believers have deserved the perfect security. And then God continues to talk about the story of Abraham. And God says, such was our argument with which we supported Abraham against his people. So this was God's argument. It says, this was not a path of discovery of finding God. It was an argument that he had constructed, by God's leave, to support him against his people. And it says, we exalt whomever we will to higher ranks. Your Lord is most wise, omniscient. And we granted him Isaac and Jacob, and we guided both of them. Similarly, we guided Noah before that, and from his descendants, we guided David, Solomon, Job, Joseph, Moses, and Aaron. We thus reward the righteous. Also, Zechariah, Jesus, also Zechariah, John, Jesus, and Elias, all were righteous. And Ishmael, Elisha, Jonah, and Lot, all of these we distinguish over all the people. From among their ancestors, their descendants, and their siblings, we chose many, and we guided them in a straight path. So these are all the prophets and messengers that God has sent, and God says in a similar manner, just like Abraham, God gave him his sons Isaac and um, Ishmael, and he guided them, and God says God says he granted he granted him Isaac and Jacob and guided both of them. Similarly for Noah, God said he guided him and he gave him descendants in his progeny that were guided. And David was one of them, and then his son Solomon, and then later on Job, and Joseph and Moses and Aaron. I mean, all these were from the progeny of Noah in this case, and coming from the uh, same heritage, right? And God says, "We thus reward the righteous." So God made these people distinguish among all the people by uh, guiding such people, right? And the thing is, uh, you and I can also be guided by God, in the same way. I mean, these people were chosen by God because they were righteous, right? And if you're righteous, God could guide you in the same way, and you could have the same relationship with God. I mean, as the messenger says, you can even have a better relationship, if you can be better, right? So it's really up to us how um, we we choose to make God our God, and how much we love God and how much we worship Him, as part of our day. But nevertheless, these people were chosen for the qualities of their souls and their devotion to God, and we know that they set good examples, and obviously God wants us to follow in their footsteps. So may God guide us in the same path as all these people, as it says, in the straight path. And with this, I will end. If you guys have any comments or questions, please feel free. Thank you.
MashaAllah. Thank you, brother. MashaAllah. Thank you. Good study.
Inshallah, inshallah.
Yes, very good verses we're talking about. And it's a good reminder for us and the things that we're told here about disregarding those who take the religion in vain, as if it's a social function, and also those who are totally absorbed in this worldly life. And it's good to remind these people, but also at the same time, that's kind of where it ends for our own benefit and safety in a sense of our reckoning, because we don't want to get sucked into these people and to think that as a submitter, if we're, I mean, we know we don't think like this, but there could be people that may have been tricked or by the devil or the companion to think that they're so good that they won't be influenced by such people. And we can see this is a mistake on their part.
Mhm.
Um, Yeah, and it's a good point too about the one of the later verses about those who deserve the perfect security. You know, because even naturally, you know, like uh, people should think. I'm talking specifically about idol worshippers
Hmm.
that you know, if they just use examples, I think from this world too, that we see parallels and maybe metaphorical or allegorical examples. You know, like God would never be okay with you worshiping other than Him, and for people to think that, I mean, it's like saying, "Would your this is just an example. It's but like in the sense of you know, like how God made the male and the female, and you have like, would your husband or wife ever be okay with you marrying somebody else behind their back, or are you being? I mean, no, it's absurdity. I mean, it's the same. We're given these examples uh, about you know multiple masters in the Quran. How you can never be devoted to more than one, and to for people to think wrongly about God. It's I mean, logically, they should be able to come to these conclusions, but you know, worshiping something else. I mean, you know, these people aren't gonna be provided with the same security because and for them to expect God to still uh or their idols to have give them the security is you know, they're just being led on obviously by the devil. So it's like it reminded me of the verse that from I think it was from what Abraham said. You know, I cannot go wrong by employing my Lord alone. I will devote myself absolutely to Him alone. You know, I cannot go wrong. Um, so I mean, there's so much good information in the Quran.
mashallah.
Yeah, you know the thing is that um, for all these people who worship these idols, God God had put this instinctive knowledge about worshiping Him alone, and so all the other stuff that they invented, I mean, this is stuff that they learned, or were taught, or stuff that they made up. So, I mean, none of their excuses uh, will be accepted from them in any way. I mean, imagine like the things that they think that they will argue if they were if they find out on the day of judgment that they were wrong. They'll just, like, I've heard people say, no, I'll just tell God that you sent him and I believe him. And like, same about, I've heard stuff about like Muhammad and stuff. People will say, no, no, God, I followed your messenger and this and that. And all of these people will feel obviously so much hatred for themselves, and so much regret and remorse for the decisions that they made. It's like, in this world, I mean, when you let's say, you was on mute on OBS, so I'm gonna start again. So I was saying that imagine, for example, like in this world, when people make a mistake, uh, and let's say you make a very silly mistake and you lose a whole lot because of it. Like let's say you if you just spend $5 on something, like you could have saved, let's say, $1 million, right? Just to give you an example. And so, but you said no. I don't think that this thing is real. Let's say you had some business idea or something, and then you find out that you did that, made that decision, that things could change, and or let's say you made some small mistake. uh, let's say you forgot to lock your car and someone broke into your car and stole it, or something like that. I mean, you'd feel really kind of upset at yourself, like, how did you let this happen? To And people will get upset at themselves, for things like that. But on the day of judgment, God says that they will really hate themselves, like, feel hatred towards themselves for what they did. And then God says that, God's hatred of these people, against these people, is even more than their own hatred against themselves at that point, because, they chose something so evil and unjust and so ridiculous. I mean, imagine the Lord of the universe. I mean, if you really put it into perspective, I mean, what an injustice it is for you to idolize anything, anyone other than God, as a partner next to God, when God has given you the instinctive knowledge to worship Him alone, and you had that instinctive knowledge, and you went down in this world, and you were given the messages, you were sent the messengers, you saw the guidance, and you fought against it. And here, now on the day of judgment, you are watching your eternal doom. So we can just imagine, like, the amount of remorse, and as God says in the Quran, the abhorrence that these people will have towards themselves. The amount of sadness and regret, and I mean, it's unimaginable, right? But at the same time, I mean, we understand that God has made this promise for the very fortunate people, and that not everybody will get to that level. Obviously, we know. I mean, it's wishful thinking for a lot of people that they think that they are among these people. When you talk to them, like, and I'm talking about idol worshippers. I'm not even talking about people who classify themselves among submitters. But we know that this is the minority of the minority that is able to make it to that level, simply by adhering to God's commandments, which sounds very simple, but it becomes, as people say, the devil is in the details, right? So when you really get into it, like, you understand, okay, this is not an easy path. Like, you have all of these traps set in between. Like, the whole path from start to finish is full of traps, right?
Mashallah, brother, right? Also, like the Quran is like it points out like every kind of like it. The Quran is against every any kind of idols. We know there's verses about properties being your idol. There's verses about money, gold. It's um like it's against any type of idol worship. And like you said, plus like we have the instinct, and then we have the Quran where it's telling you what's the right path. So of course, like the truthful will automatically be directed in that path. But we know how the Quran works. It's both ways. Like if you're not a sincere person, not a sincere believer, if you're a bad person, then you'll be led to that path as well. But it's important to know that the Quran, what the Quran stands for, and kind of adding to what you were saying, it's totally against any type of idol worship, and it points out the true path, and that's submission to God alone.
Mm-hmm.
Subhanallah.
Okay. Um, are there any other comments or questions from anyone? John, you have a question?
No, I was just looking at the verses.
Okay.
I
Okay.
had a comment.
Okay. What do you guys think about Abraham's debate with the idol worshippers?
Yeah, I think it shows a lot of courage
Mm-hmm.
and logic on his part too. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like the truth is very simple and straightforward, and it's
Mm-hmm.
good to discuss or debate with people in this
Mm-hmm.
matter or this type of
Mm-hmm.
way.
Mashallah.
And
Um.
then plus, especially the last part or the last or part of the maybe it's not the last, but uh, he's proven a point like devoting yourself to the one who initiated the heavens and the earth. I mean, these like people, idol worshippers, they don't think, well, who created Muhammad? Who created Jesus? Well, why would God ever command you?
Mm-hmm.
Or like it's there's a saying, kind of, I guess. Well, I'm not gonna say it, but it's like a dirty. Well, it's like
Okay.
so and so backwards. Like a saying. I guess.
Uh-huh.
Well, I heard a lot growing up where I'm from, and the South, but like it's so backwards.
Mm-hmm.
The way people think, or they
Mm-hmm.
the one who created. I mean, even for these people that worship, let's say the sun or these statues, they don't think, well, who created the rocks? Who created the tools we've used to carve these things? Like who creates the all these different things in which they made their statues, instead of or themselves too, or the other people, or if it's an idol worshiper that's worshiping, a human idol, or whether it's a rock or something, they don't. I guess logically go to the source, and even if they do, they still think it's okay, or for some reason they've told themselves uh, that God is okay with you worshiping. They really like if you ask them that, they don't really ever give you a straight answer. I'm mainly talking with Christians because these are most of
Mm-hmm.
the people I've grown up with and I've talked to over the years. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it's the same with Mohammedans and
Mm-hmm.
the traditional Muslims. But I
Mm-hmm.
think it also reflects that they're completely full of doubts. They don't have any certainty about the hereafter. Their knowledge is confused about it, just like the Quran says. They don't actually believe in it. And
Mm-hmm.
you brought, the point that, like, I think it was at the beginning of the study,
Mm-hmm.
talking about death and resurrection, how most people, mashallah, um, made a good point. Most people don't think about these things. Like
Mm-hmm.
this should literally be on people's mind
Mm-hmm.
all the time because realizing this is an illusion. Uh, I mean, it's not just like it should be naturally. I think um, like if it was, it would help these people disregard their idols and take things seriously. So if someone's bringing them a message or a piece of information or wisdom uh, about God, about submission, they're not going to just disregard it because they're so sure about their position, or they're so sure about
Mm-hmm.
their idolatry, and they're so comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And that instead of just taking a look, because if they're really playing it safe, I guess for lack of a better words, like taking it seriously and concerned and worried about themselves, then they would actually like hear you out and then I think capitalize too on the instinctive knowledge that God placed in us. So like, yeah, this makes total sense. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then the part two, verse 81. Why should I fear your idols? It is you who should be afraid, since you worship instead of God idols that are utterly powerless to help you. Which side is deserving of more? Which side is more deserving of security? If you know, and this is I think too, even for us as submitters, as we grow in our submission, this is crucial to believe and come to an understanding that God is running everything and that God is doing everything. We have to like live and breathe this, like the messenger said, because then we see things for how they really are when things are happening around us, and it'll encourage us and remove all our fears and worries. Because we know God is in full control. We believe it. Um, I mean, everything that's being done around us, even the things we do and we say, we come to this understanding. Uh, and I think this is something important for our eternal life and our salvation here. Because when you think about this, and especially I'm just kind of speaking, like when I think about this and making God your God, nothing else, everything pales in comparison, and of course, like the devil's always after us. So there's going to be times, like in our day, where we might get dragged in uh, to something worldly or worrying about something. But, quickly, um, we find ourselves remembering and thinking about God, and then, it just makes everything. Um, Like any anxiety or worry about anything or any concern or this, it just goes completely away, and you're really just left with like um, like mental, physical safety and then happiness. Just thinking about God,
Mm-hmm.
because no one else can touch you, no one can do anything, and this is just an illusion too. So these things are don't they lose power over you, and you can also see that you don't hear about these things in any other religion. Like we have the messenger of the covenant who's explained these things and clarified these things, and I mean you don't see this type of or you don't hear about this in any other religion, and you can see all these other common thing, and I'm sure we've all witnessed and noticed like the prevalence of just confusion and misery amongst the idol worshippers, like Christians, Muslims, even these self-help, humanistic, humanism, transhumanism, universe theories type people. They're really miserable, because they don't, and that should self-evidently, I think, speak for people that they don't have the truth. Because if they did, they're following the correct guidance, they wouldn't be in these positions. They wouldn't have this like mass confusion and mass um, all these problems within their congregations and their religions. Yeah, that's all I
No,
had.
that's fine. Yeah. All the hypocritical things that they do. all the evil things.
Hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a contradiction, you know, because
Mm-hmm.
like you talk to these people who are so devoted to Jesus or even Muhammad, and then you look at their life and you're like, how is this a religion that's like worth following?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you know, like especially the things we're seeing more and more of what uh, they're advocating for.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think it's good. I mean, it's good that God is running everything. These things have to be brought to light. You know, for the
Mm-hmm.
world. I mean, for
Mm-hmm.
people to see the
Mm-hmm.
fallacy and the
Mm-hmm.
you know, the
Yeah.
fallacy and
Yeah.
the problem.
Yeah. I think so. God is exposing them, more and more to these people who have not been exposed in the past, to these different things that we see unfolding. All right. Anyone else have any comments or questions? I mean, anyone has any comments or questions, or any
Yeah, mashallah.
off-topic questions?
Just um, talking about the verses that
Uh huh.
Abraham debates with idol worshippers. Verse 75, um, God says that He blessed Abraham with certainty, and um, like we know what that certainty is. You know, it's the instinct of worshiping God alone. Because before this verse in 74, he already knew what they were doing was bad. You know, it was his instinct that he already like knew like what are you doing? You know, like just with the instinct. You know, um, and we know that not like people are forgetting in this world that instinct. You know, they are totally unaware of it, and um, for most of their lives, of course, and we know in the day of judgment they won't be able, like the truth will be known then, and they will have that again. But and like sometimes when things get bad, they remember that instinct comes again. But for the most part, most of the human beings they forget that, right? And they're totally preoccupied with this world. But we know, like, also with these verses, that there's not going to be no excuse, because we all have that instinct. And, it's God who is doing everything, and God is the one who guides. So, um, God is the one that blesses us with this certainty and our guidance. It all comes from God. And also shows us like how appreciative we must be for this. Also, and like you have said earlier in the study too that um, I can't remember exactly, but it was something around these lines that we must like thank God for like keeping us guide in our guidance, and to we must ask God to continue to we must pray to God and ask God to continue to keep us remained in this guidance, and worshiping God alone and staying in His protection.
Mm. Mashallah. Yeah. Also,
MashaAllah.
mashallah, just one more thing I wanted to add. We see that how Abraham, debates with his father too. And it shows us that even though his father was an idol worshiper, like Abraham did not blindly follow him. And God doesn't want us to follow our parents blindly. Like if Abraham followed his father, obviously his father would not have his father would have taken him to hell.
Yeah, mashallah,
Hmm.
right.
I mean, religion should not be a thing for people to inherit. People born into a certain family and they inherit religion. Like someone's born. I mean, you could be born in an Asian family and say I'm Asian. But how do you use religion to say I am this or that? I mean, without actively searching through, and if everybody critically evaluated the religion that their parents preached, it would really help them shed more light on making at least somewhat an intelligent choice. But for most people, I mean, they don't even try to make that decision, they just follow blindly.
Mashallah, very good.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, especially because we see in the Quran like how many verses, like a multitude of verses about people who end up in hell is because they're there. Um, they followed their leaders
Mm-hmm.
and their parents. And I mean, even for the verses that aren't about these people in hell, I mean, the verses about people that,
Mm-hmm.
like, if they don't change, I guess the way you can look at them, but they're heading to hell essentially, based on what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing, they're just following the parents blindly. And
Mm-hmm.
really, they're just setting them up as an idol because they're preferring to listen to their parents, I guess. I mean, it's a test in of itself. I think it's not an easy test either, because I mean, God has given us our parents, and we could have been very close and trusted, and they could have been, like as a parent, they could have been good, which could make it even more difficult. Because I guess if, um, yeah, but it just comes down to
Mm-hmm.
who's your God? Is it
Mm-hmm.
is it your parents that you
Mm-hmm.
favor
Mm-hmm.
more than God, or is
Yeah.
it God?
Yeah.
I mean, the same could be said for people's children. You know,
Yeah.
uh, like is your children more important to you than God? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
or so these are serious tests. But really, when we look at when we remind ourselves like these things aren't like this life isn't the real life, and it's basically zero, like mathematically zero, and
Mm-hmm.
compared to the hereafter, then these things can become easier for us to
Mm-hmm.
pass, God willing. If like we have to go through such tests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so why do you
Mashallah.
think it becomes difficult if they're nice, you said?
Well, I mean, I think it's on an individual basis, but yeah, if they're more kinder and stuff, it's because if they're mean and abusive, I mean, it's the same thing like with a hypocrite. If a hypocrite is more kind and
Mm-hmm.
stuff, I mean, it's a lot more tricky
Right.
Mm-hmm.
uh, uh, versus like someone who's blatantly and openly evil,
Mm-hmm.
abused you as a kid. I mean, it's not that difficult. I mean, they're an evil person.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
Disregard the message and
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and so it's not difficult to not want to have anything to do with
Mm-hmm.
this person. But
Mm-hmm.
if you have a parent that
If you have a parent that is nice, then it's difficult
yeah,
to disown them
yeah,
or something because
and
of the bond.
Right.
This is why it was a good point that Brother John that you said. But it's the important thing is like God alone. It's like what you said in the end. It's like really like um what's the like best decision. Like forget like um you must like remember like you must make um the most crucial like the most it's like the most crucial and the most important decision. And if like yeah like you said like yeah it could be that's true. It could maybe be more difficult like if the parents are nice, but they have to realize that it's an illusion. And even like maybe they're nice to you, but what if like that's not the point? The point is like are they what is their stand as regards with the truth, with God alone.
Mm-hmm.
That is the point. And but these are tests that I mean we all
Mm-hmm.
chose to come down here and take these tests. So we must ask God to help us pass them, inshallah.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, especially too, it's like when people, I mean, treat you very nicely or even compliment you, and like I think about things that my own dad said to me at different points. I mean, it can be very deceptive, and
Mm-hmm.
manipulative,
Mm-hmm.
and not to
Mm-hmm.
get much
Mm-hmm.
into it, but then you realize, like you had mentioned, brother, like once you realize, like you have hard confirmation. I mean, the proof is overwhelming that they're like a clear enemy of God, like
Mm-hmm.
and that they're destined for hell. I mean, it becomes like the
Mm-hmm.
most easiest thing
Mm-hmm.
because that this person
Right. Mm-hmm.
is like an enemy to your creator.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, and really they're an enemy to themselves too. Like or
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Inshallah.
Yeah.
because we want to be nice, like how and I mean, there was also those people, Brother Suleman remembers, hypocrites, that said you don't have to. They were arguing the point. I think one of them was Mona, but yeah, she used to come to our studies and she would argue. She argued the point. At first, I don't think she did, but then she changed and she would argue the point that you can befriend
Mm-hmm.
and not disown enemies of God. Like
Mm-hmm.
as long as they're not physically fighting you, but we can see through
Mm-hmm.
the verses in the Quran, and I mean even not that we needed or relied upon explanations by the messenger, but we use it to supplement. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's very
Yeah.
clear in the Quran
Yeah.
that people you're not supposed to be with such people because these people
Mm-hmm.
are enemies of God and they're disbelievers and if you befriend such people, you're going to be just as guilty as them. I mean, Surah 58 and then Surah 9 talk about this. I mean, these are tests for people, and it's not easy too. I mean, that's why. But I think, we can't have wishful thinking on this part, or maybe that's what this person fell
Mm-hmm.
into.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking about mana, because yeah, I mean, yeah, you get these worldly benefits, you get these things, yeah, that your parents, or yeah, you might have other family members that might look at you or think different. Oh, how could this person not? But they don't understand that life isn't about these social malus and this
Mm-hmm.
blah blah blah. Like having these friends and so many people talk about family. Like how people they're not they don't know the meaning of life because like I've seen the same thing answered like, oh, what's the highest form or purpose and family? What's your meaning behind life? It's like, oh, having a
Mm-hmm.
family. Like you see these, I
Mm-hmm.
see this like so much like on interviews and just people talking. It comes back to family. I mean, you can see
Mm-hmm.
how this becomes why it's I guess
Mm-hmm.
such a big idol for people. Why it's difficult for people, but um,
Yeah, and the funny thing was, her name was not real name was not even Mona, right? It was
oh, it was. Okay, also, wow,
No,
yeah,
because that's a name that she liked to go by. You know, that was a cool sounding name that I don't know for whatever reason, and she insisted on using that name. But it clearly goes against. It clearly was a good indicator that the
yeah,
person has doesn't want to submit to God. Like
yeah.
this wasn't the first person we came across who
Adam
didn't want
too.
to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. Yeah, Ali. And well, I forgot this person's name. It wasn't Mona, but it was like some other name, and she liked to go by this name. And they came up with all kinds of ideas. But yeah, I mean that's such a silly argument because there's no physical fighting uh, anymore like we're gonna see
uh,
in our lifetime. Like that
yeah, like
means
if you
now
went
you
by
get
that logic,
now
you
you can
befriend
befriend
every
all the hypocrites,
person.
all the disbelievers. And then also
Yeah,
that, and also, with all the instructions that we have from God and all the examples we have, including Abraham's own father, like they would try to put their parents in a special category, and try to confuse people. I mean, this I've seen
right.
among
Good
other
point.
people also, like among other people I've seen in the past also that they try to be very staunch believers, but when it comes to their parents, then they have like different standards, or their
Yeah,
relatives
no,
even.
I didn't know about that. That's extremely
Yeah,
important. I think that's
yeah.
probably it makes sense why these people where they fell off to begin with. Because like it's like like the Quran tells us, if you think about the verse, it says you should be absolutely equitable and bearing
Mhm,
witness, even against
mhm,
yourselves
mhm,
or even against your family. So like you can't have special treatment in the same way we're told not to have special treatment. So if your parent, you know, let's say steals 5 cookies from the jar, like you have to tell, you have like look sorry, like yeah, you're my parent. I mean, if you love them,
mhm.
like in a way where they wanted to help. I mean, the same thing, for a child, you have to, because
Five
it's
cookies from
the
the
right.
jar.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, exactly. The thing is
yeah,
that what we see is people when Satan is trying to look for ways to trap people, and when he sees these fault lines, that's all he really needs to come in and get these people. So when people want to compromise on certain aspects of their religion, Satan comes in very easy and plays with these people's egos and takes them away. Where we know that we are not to compromise with our religion when it comes to God. Like we have to obey God, and we have to submit to Him completely. Like we can't pick and choose which commandments we want to follow, and disregard certain other commandments. By pushing our own personal bias or our own personal opinions because we want something a certain way.
yeah, good
Mashallah.
point. Yeah, we have to be hard on ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
like ourselves, because we don't. This is like our only chance, and uh, I mean, too, we know yeah, everything's accounted for, so we want God willing our record to be good. So
Okay. All right, so I guess that's that's I guess a pretty good study for now. God willing. If there are no other comments or questions from anyone else, God willing, we can conclude today's study. Yeah, so thank you all for joining us. Thank you, brother Raphael and John, for joining us, and Huda, and the cats.
And the cat.
yeah, after listening.
Yeah. So God willing, our next English Quran study would be on Saturday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. God bless you all. Assalamu alaikum.
God bless you. Assalamu